Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I am joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, and I know a skull fucker when I see one. So Josh, knock it off already, huh?
Oh, man, you don't know what I'm doing over here, do you? So, in this special 10th retrospective season of Awesome Movie Year, each episode we are taking a look at a different year that we have covered in past seasons. And in this episode, we are returning to 2007, and it is my personal pick episode. So I have picked Smiley Face, the stoner comedy from Gregg Araki, which in a year, as we talked about when we did our season on 2007, a year that is often held up as one of the greatest years for film in the past few decades, even. This is probably not one of the most notable movies from that year, but I love it.
And a stoner comedy. I mean, Dave didn't pick it. Josh picked it. What is going on here today?
Yeah.
Right.
Crazy.
Well, the truth is, although, I don't partake, I love stoner comedies because I feel like they can be done really, and I think this movie is, and maybe you guys will not agree with me, but in a sort of dumb, smart way, that the idiocy and the sort of weird logic of stoners can be a really clever, funny way to bring in absurdism and commentary in a way that another kind of comedy wouldn't. So, I mean, I enjoy the Harold and Kumar movies, which I'm sure we'll give at least one more mention to later on, and kind of stoner adjacent things like the Bill and Ted movies, where maybe, or Wayne and Garth, the Wayne's World movies, where maybe the characters aren't getting stoned on camera, but they're getting stoned right when the cameras are off. So
it's interesting because I don't. I bring up Super Troopers a lot, which you don't like, and that's a super stoner adjacent comedy, right? And
that's true. Yeah, the first one I didn't mind. The second one is quite bad, I think.
I'm really talking about the first one. I didn't mind the second one, but yeah, I didn't know you were. I mean, I know you like Wayne's World. I never really thought of you as a stoner comedy aficionado, though. I must admit. Hey, let me ask you before we start, does Dazed and Confused count as a stoner comedy? It's literally called Dazed and Confused, right?
Yeah, it could. There's a wide range. I, for many years, wrote for a cannabis publication about cannabis-related pop culture. So I ended up seeing a lot of stoner movies because of that. And there are a lot of very bad ones. I will say that saying that I enjoy them doesn't mean that I enjoy all of them, because it's very easy to make a very bad stoner comedy. But I think when done right, it can be really enjoyable. And I think this is one of the best, if not the best, stoner comedy.
Well, Josh, before we go any further, since you have such a long history of covering them, do you have any other underrated gems like this that we might not know about that you want to recommend?
Yeah, you know what? I will say there are a few. I enjoy the Reefer Madness musical with Kristen Bell and Alan Cumming, Anna Gasteyer, which is a fun, goofy take on, of course, the classic, or pseudo-classic anti-marijuana movie from the 1930s. I think you, Jason, also enjoy The Whackness.
Great.
Right?
It's a great movie. I love that movie.
Yeah, that's a really good one with Josh Peck. And you mentioned Dazed and Confused. I also like Everybody Wants Some, the Richard Linklater kind of spiritual sequel to that I think also qualifies as a stoner movie.
Not as good.
But how about Never Going Back, which we covered on Piecing It Together?
Absolutely, Never Going Back, and that's something I might have brought up as clearly influenced here by Smiley Face, which I probably mentioned when we did an episode on that. But yeah, I really like that movie a lot from just a few years ago. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of clever ways to use stoner characters to tell a fun comedy story that is maybe smarter than it initially appears, I think.
Well, you're the expert, so let's...
Apparently, I've decided to be, or we've all decided that I'm now the expert on this.
Well, what do you got for us today, Josh?
Well, let's see. The strain that I have for you today is
called Smiley Face, man.
Yeah. So Smiley Face, despite my affection for it, was a huge failure when it was released in 2007, or should I say barely released in 2007. It did premiere at the 2007 Sundance Film Festival, which makes sense because Gregg Araki, the director, this was his follow-up to Mysterious Skin, which was a highly acclaimed, award-winning, award-nominated serious drama with Joseph Gordon-Levitt that was a big breakout role for him as well. And even prior to that, Gregg Araki had been a very successful independent filmmaker, really influential in the new queer cinema movement in the 90s. So I'm sure he'd played Sundance multiple times before, but this movie is a big departure for him in a lot of ways. So despite premiering at Sundance, it was released. What I had initially read was that it was released only in a single theater in LA and never elsewhere. But it was clearly also released in New York based on the reviews that I found. But it didn't ever get a release beyond at least those two cities, it sounds like. It grossed $179,000 worldwide. And only $9,400 of that was in the US. So really a big old failure there.
I mean, it's tough to be a success if you don't get a release, you know?
Well, right. And I don't know exactly the details of why that happened. You know, it may be a distributor that picked it up from Sundance didn't know what to do with it. But yeah, it seems like this is a movie that really didn't even have the potential to reach an audience until later on video. And I think another thing about stoner comedies is that they do better when people can watch them at home.
Yeah.
And get stoned.
I mean, look, it didn't, it's no Boondock Saints. But
what is?
There you go.
That's a movie where you really need to be stoned in order to endure it. We don't need to rehash Boondock Saints. But Anna Faris, star of this film, did win the Stoner of the Year award at the High Times Stony Awards in 2007. So, you know, that's an achievement.
Did you vote? Did you vote for that one? Being the stoner movie critic, impresario, shall we say?
Oh, impresario, a word that you now know how to spell. I did not vote for those awards, nor have I ever, although I'd vote for that. I don't know if it still exists. I have not written for High Times. I wrote only for a lesser known local publication about stoner culture. This is also Gregg Araki's only film that he directed but did not write. The screenplay instead by Dylan Haggerty, and possibly another one of the reasons why this movie doesn't really resemble his other films a whole lot. Reviews were mixed and also not numerous given the limited release here. But some critics were into it, and I feel like this is another movie that's grown in reputation. But Matt Zoller Seitz in the New York Times was a fan and had a take that I'm not sure I quite get. He said, Smiley Face, about a pot-addled would-be actress stumbling through a long, weird day in Los Angeles, is a contradiction in terms, a stoner comedy with a purpose. Despite its laid-back script, Smiley Face is as prankishly political as Mr. Araki's Doom Generation, evincing a deep unease with the media-saturated capitalist nation that Jane crawls inside her bong to escape. The film's title is drawn from a scene in which Jane envisions the sun as a smiley face. The implication is subtle but clear. Americans fancy themselves free-willed strivers who live in the best of all possible worlds, but they're really sentient vegetables, rooted in comfort and nourished by manufactured images of bliss.
Talk about a skull fucker. What a dick this guy is.
I don't know.
Can it just be a fun stoner comedy and that's it, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. Like, I love this movie, but I feel like he's really stretching to make this that political.
Yeah, it's definitely not that political. There was other stuff I disagreed with, but I mean, there was so many things that I disagreed with in this thing that I can't even go back to the beginning of it. Jesus, man, he makes me feel stoned, and like, what a horrible review. No matter how you feel about it, at least be accurate, you know.
Yeah, to be fair, other parts of this that I did not quote, I think had some factual errors as well about the plot or the characters. So maybe he was stoned while watching it, which would not
Possible.
be inappropriate.
The Doom Generation was part of the Teenage Apocalypse trilogy. Totally fucked up the Doom Generation Nowhere. Those were kind of the ones that I knew him from, put him on the map. But I've seen parts of the Doom Generation because it always used to run on cable. But I've never seen those movies. Have you?
I have seen the Doom Generation, and I think I've seen Totally Fucked Up also. And I wasn't really into those movies. That's another thing it's weird to me that I love this movie so much, because in general, I'm not a particular fan of Gregg Araki's work.
Yeah, this is a total outlier for you, man.
It is. I mean, my enjoyment of stoner comedies, but yeah, in terms of his work. But I think the thing is that this is an outlier for him as well. And maybe another reason why this movie wasn't very successful is that people who were fans of his work came to this and said, what the hell is this? Like, this isn't what we expect from him. Nathan Lee in The Village Voice was not one of those people. He loved this movie and related it to Araki's other films. He said, I can say with some authority that Dylan Haggerty has written an 11th hour candidate for the funniest movie of 2007, that Gregg Araki has directed his finest film since 1997's Nowhere, and that Anna Faris, Flawless, rocks their inspired idiot odyssey in a virtuoso comedic turn. Araki keeps his screwball rolling with a freewheeling touch, bouncing with ease from goofball monologue to manic slapstick to dusted interludes of unconsciousness and hallucination. Haggerty writes the smartest kind of dumb comedy. His fuzzy nuggets of Marxist mumbo-jumbo neatly acknowledge the countercultural pretensions and random acts of thinking that accompany a monumental pot binge. And that to me was more of how I took the supposed political content, that it's all part of her sort of hazy mental state. And that includes having these not entirely coherent insights about the state of the world.
Anna Faris is great, and she's always been a great comedic actress. Best comedy of 2007, Josh. You got Knocked Up. You got Superbad. You're telling me this is a funnier movie than Superbad? I'll pass on that. Hot Rod. I always like Hot Rod. If you want to count Ratatouille, you can do that. And of course, Wild Hogs. No, I'm just kidding about the last one. But it's definitely not funnier than Superbad and Knocked Up. Hot Fuzz. Come on, man. Get with it.
How about the 10, guys?
Oh, how about not that?
Yeah, but my examples were good.
Yeah, your examples are good. And certainly, like, in the general consensus, those movies are much more acclaimed and popular. I personally do find this funnier than those movies and enjoy it more than them, but not to say that I don't enjoy those movies. I mean, we talked about Superbad in a whole episode, and I enjoyed that. But honestly, this was the third time for me seeing this movie, and I still laughed like throughout. So I would probably say, for me, this is the funniest movie of 2007.
Well, you're just as bad as that guy who wrote that thing.
I am just as bad as this well-respected film critic for The Village Voice. I'm sorry.
Oh, The Village Voice. I've heard of that. Do you want to tell us about your local marijuana-based publication that doesn't exist anymore that you wrote for?
To be fair, The Village Voice also doesn't exist anymore.
That is fair. So,
John DeFore in The Hollywood Reporter was not a fan of this film. He said, in a big shift from Araki's icky, mysterious skin, the picture hasn't a shred of interest in probing psyches or social ills. A pure, mostly dumb comedy, it's the tale of one impossibly out-of-it girl, Anna Faris's Jane F., who spends her day stumbling from mishap to mishap in an effort to avoid her drug dealer's wrath. She encounters a string of familiar faces along the way, but few stick around long enough to take any weight off Faris, whose performance relies heavily on a hanging open mouth, droop-lidded eyes, and long periods of dumbstruck silence. Some viewers will embrace this textbook caricature. For others, it will make the film's 87 minutes feel like hours. And even if you don't like this movie, I feel like you have to give Anna Faris credit for the performance here.
Yeah, she's good. She was always a very good comedy actress. when she was kind of like one of the big names in that field. And, I guess now she's, Mom was the last thing I remember her in, and she's moved away from film into more of that sitcom-y stuff. But we always know she can pull off comedy, and she does a great stoner, like you said, Harold and Kumar, Dude, Where's My Car, all that stuff. She fits right in with that.
She does. I feel like it's an even greater, like, honestly, I would have nominated her for an Oscar for this movie. That has how great I think her performance is.
You're insane today. What is happening here?
I picked a movie that I really like for us to talk about. That's what's happening.
I just want to add, this was right in the middle of a pretty big run for her. I mean, at the end of the scary movies, but like a lot of comedies and cult classics and all that.
Yeah, and bigger. I mean, obviously the scary movie series were very successful, and this movie was not. Sure. So, she had that mainstream comedy presence here when she made this more, indie comedy film. So,
yeah.
Jason, I'm assuming you had not seen this movie before.
Wait a second. Let me just say, here is who was nominated for the Oscars for Best Actress of this year. Okay.
Okay.
So this is who you want to take out. You want to take out Marianne Cotillard for La Vie en Rose. She won.
Yeah.
Cate Blanchett for Elizabeth II, The Golden Age.
Oh, yeah.
Julie Christie.
That's not a good movie.
Julie Christie away from her. Laura Linney, The Savages. Or Elliot Page as Ellen Page in Juno. So which one are you taking out?
I will take out Cate Blanchett, who is great, but that movie is not good.
All right. Good enough. So.
See? Fair. Easy. You really thought you were challenging me, but you were wrong.
Yeah, you're really all in on this. I have seen this based on your recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did I see? I didn't recall. Did you like it when I recommended it to you before?
I thought it was mediocre, and I didn't understand your obsession with it. And today, I think it's mediocre, and I don't understand your obsession with it.
All right. Well, at least your opinion hasn't gotten worse. So.
I mean, I gave it another chance, and it's still just like you said you were laughing the whole time. I'm like, at what?
I will say, to be fair, I forgot that you had seen this before. And this is certainly a movie that if you don't like it the first time, you will not like it seeing it a second time.
I just think it's such a, like, I mean, you could have, when we were developing this season, right? We had all these years to choose from. We had all these different types of movies. And this was the one where like, I'm taking this. This is my personal pick. You're staking your claim for Smiley Face, Josh.
I love this. And, and this has happened to both of us. I think sometimes we do these picks and it's like, oh, I liked that movie when I saw it, but maybe I haven't seen it since the year that we're talking about, and hopefully it'll hold up. And sometimes it's like, maybe I didn't like this quite as much. And I had seen this more recently than 2007, but I still was like, I hope this will work. And I just loved it even more this time, I think.
Well,
honestly.
You're right. It still holds up as mediocre.
All right. Dave, did you see this one before?
I actually had never seen it. No. Yeah. I don't know how it kind of got away from me, but I didn't like it as much as you, Josh, but it's fun though. It's definitely an accurate depiction of eating edibles. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. This seems like the kind of movie that Dave would, as Jason was saying before, that Dave would be more into maybe than I would be. Yeah. All right. Well, Jason, any more you want to mention on the background of you not liking this movie?
No, I mean, it's interesting because it's still played like it had like a big premiere, or it played at the London Lesbian and Gay Festival, right? Which I think is more based. I mean, there's nothing sexually in this movie that would take it that way, but it's Araki, as like a new queer director, like you said. The other thing was, I thought that was interesting, is Dylan Haggerty wrote this script. It was stuck in an option. Araki had read it, and then 5 years later, the option came up, and then he bought it to make. So this thing had just been kind of toiling, and this is it. This is Dylan Haggerty's only real credit, as far as I could tell.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, given the non-success of this movie, it's not surprising that it didn't launch his career into another level. Especially after it took all that time where people were reluctant to make it, apparently.
Well, that's where I would dispute with you, where you had said that it has like gained in status over the years. I don't think it has. I think it's always been one of those where like some people are like, yeah, it's fine. Other people love it. But I mean, this is not one of those where it's like a Hot Fuzz per se, where it's like or Superbad, where it's blown up. Superbad was popular anyway, but you know,
and Hot Fuzz was too. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's at the level of those movies either initially or now, but
Super Troopers.
Yeah, Super Troopers would be a better example, and it's not as popular as Super Troopers. But I definitely saw this not in 2007, some number of years later, because I had read, critical assessments of it and that this was an underrated comedy or, stoner movie worth seeing. So I think it does have a reputation that has grown, but you're right, not to the level of something like Super Troopers. If they made Smiley Face 2 now, no one would contribute to that crowdfunding campaign.
Except you.
Except me, I would.
Yeah.
Dave, remember when we did Blair Witch and you were like telling us how you remembered or misremembered like the lore of the Blair Witch from before seeing this movie and whatever.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel, because I feel like this is one of those that I remember on the Blockbuster wall and that's where I got it from. But that's clearly not true, because this came out in 2007. So that was long after my time at Blockbuster. And I think maybe Blockbuster didn't even exist then. I don't remember. But so yeah, man, my mind is fried.
All right. Well, we'll come back then in a moment and talk about our general thoughts on Smiley Face. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year in this episode of our special retrospective season. We are returning to 2007 for another personal pick from me, and it is the stoner comedy Smiley Face, which I love, and as we've already established, Jason is baffled by my love for it. So, Jason, do you have anything? What did you like about this, if anything?
Yeah, no, okay. As I said, I liked Anna Faris, right? I like John Krasinski. I think out of the supporting players, he's the best. And, it's also fun to see John Cho, who we know from Harold and Kumar, and who's really blown up into one of the great actors around today. Other than that, like Marion Ross from Happy Days, that's fun, right? I guess. But
yeah.
The thing is, it wouldn't matter to me if it had all these like cool young actors or not. If the humor worked for me, then I'd have been like, great. But I just think like it's one long joke over and over again, and it didn't really work for me. I don't think I laughed once.
Wow. Okay. I mean, I'm with you on all the supporting players that it's fun to see, and some that I had forgotten were in this, like Jim Rash and Brian Posehn, who plays the bus driver, and people who just show up and have like 3 lines or something, but it's fun to see like, oh, hey, there's that person. And they're
let me
amusing.
stop you there for a quick second. Jim Rash, Brian Posehn, did they add anything? Could those characters have been anyone?
Well, right. That was what I was saying, is that they only have a few lines, but it's still fun to see those actors. And I mean, they do more maybe than nobody would do, but no, those aren't parts where there's really a lot for an actor to dig into, but it's still fun to see, especially someone like Brian Posehn or like Dave Gruber Allen at the end, who are known for being, part of stoner culture, and, nice to put them in here. But no, that's not my number one thing that I enjoy about this film. I just was agreeing with your contribution there. I mean, and as we've talked about with so many comedies, especially a lot of Dave's picks that we end up being less enthused about.
Hey, don't put this on Dave.
No. What I'm just saying is that, with comedy, I can't argue. I can't tell you that, you're wrong and you did laugh or whatever. And you can't tell me the opposite that I didn't. That's something that's just, it's not you can't really have a critical argument about it. To me, the humor in this movie is effective. A lot of it comes from Anna Faris's performance, where even if there's not a specific joke, just the way that she delivers lines and her facial expressions, to me, is hilarious. And I'm laughing throughout. And the supporting players who have more to do than Brian Posehn or Jim Rash, like John Krasinski, as you said, or Adam Brody, I am amused by their performances.
What amused you about Adam Brody's performance, who we know is adept at comedy? There was nothing there.
I mean, I love that character who is so convinced, the drug dealer character who is so convinced that Reaganomics is the way to explain his business model for selling drugs. That makes no sense whatsoever. And just his conviction in that I thought was funny. And then that's another a very amusing moment where she is, sort of semi-lucid randomly and explaining to him about economic theory and whatever. And the runner, the joke here that she is like an economics major from college and has this knowledge sort of like buried in her brain somewhere, and it comes out at random moments, I thought was a really nice character detail and very funny.
I like that, but it's interesting that we're talking about this. I just watched the first episode of Peacemaker. What is
Peacemaker,
it? Peacemaker, right? And literally the opening scene is like, or right before the credits, John Cena, the Peacemaker, is talking to a janitor, and the janitor is like, he goes, "Can I trust you?" He goes, "No, man, you can't trust me. I went to MIT and I'm a janitor. I have no, use for responsibility." And I thought like within 3 lines, they had done a more effective take on what you're talking about than this whole movie did.
Wow. I mean, I think that is a funny joke, but I disagree that the way that they present that in this movie is ineffective. I think it's subtly effective. It's something that maybe doesn't jump out at you immediately, but because it keeps coming up, I feel like it establishes that it's just another aspect of her sort of slacker stoner persona, that she, could have been some sort of economist, but instead she's sitting on her couch getting high and failing to be an actress.
Well, I liked it as a character. I should clarify. I liked it as a character trait. I just didn't think the humor of it was, front and center to the point where it worked for me.
Yeah.
So,
well, all right.
But here's the thing that really shocks me, Josh, is like, you and I, Josh, you on this show have time and again talked about characters that are horrible people and just how awful they are. And it usually makes you dislike that movie or that character. And Jane is a horrible person. She's awful. She goes and she eats her. She's got like 2 things to do: pay the power bill, don't eat these cupcakes. She eats the cupcakes and doesn't pay the power bill. She's selfish. She screws up everything. She is not a good person. What is it that you like about her other than it's Anna Faris?
Well, 2 things. One, it's not that I can't enjoy or never like movies where the characters are unlikable. To me, if you have characters that are that unlikable and unpleasant, you really need to craft something around them that is fascinating to watch. And I feel like a lot of times that doesn't happen because you're sort of fighting an uphill battle on something like that. But there are movies that I love starring characters who are deeply unlikable. I mean, off the top of my head, I think of Young Adult with Charlize Theron, who plays a horrible, horrible person in that movie, which I think is a brilliant, hilarious film. But I would disagree, or at least, again, from my perspective on this film, I find Jane extremely likable in this film. And like, yes, she makes very bad decisions a lot of the time, but she's such a pleasant, well-meaning person. And part of the story of this film, why she goes on this odyssey and fails in so many ways, is that immediately upon eating those cupcakes of her roommate, who she doesn't like and is, as we've established, a skullfucker, she regrets it and says, I must do everything that I can to replace these cupcakes. And she's insanely stoned, and so she miserably fails at doing that. But one of the things I really like about this movie is the way that it has this sort of sunny outlook, that even as Jane, gets in deeper and deeper into trouble of her own making, she has this, stoner perspective of like, isn't the world amazing? And that to me is more what the title is about, rather than whatever weird stuff Matt Seitz in the New York Times was talking about.
It's a subtle representation of Americans as they should be and as they actually are?
I don't. I think it's a subtle or not subtle representation of Jane's perspective on life. So I disagree with your premise there.
All right. Well, I disagree with your premise there.
All right.
Can I throw in the middle of you guys there?
Yeah,
I think
please.
Part of the charm of this movie, even though I didn't like it as much as Josh, is the low stakes of it. And part of that is Adam Brody's like very weak threat to her of what's going to happen if she doesn't pay, is like, I don't know, maybe I'll take your furniture or something. And I think that's part of why, even though this character isn't really that good of a person. I think Jason's kind of right. She is like very lazy and just not making right choices at all. It kind of doesn't matter because everything in this world is just so low stakes and so low energy and stoned all the time.
I mean, it's not as low stakes as Let's Go to White Castle, right? So to me, I disagree with you because they're going to have zero furniture. She bought this fancy bed, right? And they're going to have no power in the house. And she's probably going to get kicked out. And she screwed up this dude's, LARPing science fun, stoner cupcake. So I think the stakes are a little higher than you say, Dave. But
okay,
yeah. Even so, I'm just wondering, man. It's just a lot of issues with this Jane F. She takes advantage of Brevin. Because he's got an ongoing crush on her. She steals a communist manifesto from a professor for no reason.
But not on purpose. She just sort of finds herself in possession of it when she's trying to hide from the cops.
She never says to the professor's mom, "Hey, I'm not a teaching assistant. This isn't for me." She just goes along with it. She's a real asshole, dude. That's a first edition Communist Manifesto, and that guy teaches Marxist studies. Think of what that means to him, Josh.
That is true. I'm sure the professor was very, very upset with her. So, but I mean, I'm with you, Dave, in that this is a low stakes story. No, not as low stakes as just let's go get food, but certainly not as high stakes as I saw this compared to a movie that I don't like, but that I know you do like, Dave, Good Time, the Safdie Brothers movie, about someone who keeps screwing up more and gets himself in deeper and deeper. But, there's a lot more danger to that film and higher stakes and seriousness than there is in this film. So I do think the sort of low stakes nature of it, or rather, and this is also what happens in Harold and Kumar, that what it initially starts with has fairly low stakes, even that's just let's go to White Castle. And in the process of attempting to accomplish this small task, the stakes get bigger and bigger.
That goes back to, Into the Night, right? And John Landis, and that kind of, not that was the first ever Into the Night movie, but that's the movie that genre is kind of based on. And, we talked about Superbad, right? Let's go to the party and get beer, same type of thing. But yeah, I don't know. I think, we're saying for you, it worked. For me, it didn't. A few other things is when it started, it was let's talk about how we get from A to Z, right? And how many letters did they actually go through where they gave up on that idea, Josh?
I don't know, but that was not my primary concern. But it also wouldn't surprise me if, some obsessive fan who probably doesn't exist to that degree for this film could go through and find all the letters that were actually there.
Okay.
It would not surprise me. I'm not saying it's true, but it wouldn't surprise me if it were.
Even if it is, they make it very obvious for A, B, and C, and then it's a Where's Waldo of letters. So is that an effective way to do it if that's the case? I'm just saying it gave up on its own premise within the first act. So there are things like that bother me. I don't know how you put Jane Lynch in a comedy movie and make her not funny, but they found a way to do it. So just a miss on a lot of things for me.
Jane Lynch is you're pointing out about Brian Posehn or Jim Rash. She just has a small function there and she serves the function. It's not a showcase for Jane Lynch, but she's not bad in that role.
She's not bad, but everything should be a showcase for Jane Lynch, Josh.
All right. Also, from your point about the A to Z thing, maybe they're not showing you every one of those letters, but to me, I didn't even notice the B and C. So, those are probably, a little more subtle as well. To me, the point wasn't that, hey, we're going to show you a whole alphabet of letters, but that this is a long journey. We're going from point A to point Z. It's going to be this big odyssey, and we're preparing you for that.
Hey, so Dave, did you notice B and C before you got lost in there?
No, not really. But I also kind of thought, and maybe this is giving it a little too much credit, but I kind of thought this is behind the scenes, this is lazy and stonery too,
Maybe. But again, I
so the filmmakers didn't try, and that gets credit. You're giving it credit.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. No, see, I feel like one of the things about this and other movies, good stoner movies, is that the filmmakers do try, is that you can tell that there's a lot of thought and cleverness and structure in these movies about people who have none of those things. And that goes for this movie, and that goes for at least the first and third Harold and Kumar movies and some of the other stuff that I mentioned. You know, Richard Linklater is certainly a filmmaker with plenty of attention to detail. So I think that that's hopefully not the case here. I think that these are filmmakers who did pay attention to what they were doing.
I mean, it just, to me, doesn't belong in the same category as those movies. You know, Dazed and Confused is one of my favorite movies of all time. You know, we talked about Superbad, how much I like that, and even Super Troopers. But I don't know. I mean, I guess, you know, it's just a matter of taste, and like, you know, we agree on Anna Faris, so that's something, right?
That is something. What did you think about Roscoe Lee Browne, Jason?
I like that.
Like that's,
yeah. You know, I remember him from the Cosby Show, and it was, of course, you know, now he's famous again, but it was fun seeing William Zabka at the end as the prison guard, you know. Roscoe Lee Browne, it's interesting because they shine such a light on it in the same way that Harold and Kumar did Neil Patrick Harris, right? I like Roscoe Lee Browne as the narrator, but I don't think it was as effective as the usage of NPH was in Harold and Kumar.
Yeah, well, it's much less extensive. I mean, NPH, especially as that became a franchise, he was like a central character in the ongoing saga of Harold and Kumar. But yeah, I like that Roscoe Lee Browne. And he's someone who's famous, but not that famous. And the idea that this stoner would pick that guy as the guy that she's like, whoa, Roscoe Lee Browne, like, was just such a weird, random choice. And I don't know if that's something that was, you know, written into the script and then they recruited him, or it could have been any number of people and that was who they got. But either way, I felt like it worked with her character.
I'll tell you what I thought worked was where they're in that kind of slaughterhouse and she's giving this speech on like unions and workers' rights and everything. And she gives like a very kind of detailed, intelligent speech. And then it said, but what she really said, and it was, you know, stoner gibberish nonsense. I wanted to see more humor like that.
I do. I like that moment too. And I feel like there's a lot of moments that are commentary like that, you know, text on screen and stuff like that. And there's another very similar moment where she's writing her new to-do list or whatever on the side of the box as she's in the truck on the way to the meatpacking plant. And it's this very detailed plan. And then you cut to the shot of what she wrote and it's just scribbles on the side of the box. And that's, you know, that's a similar joke there. So I clearly am not going to convince you that this is a good movie, Jason. So we probably should just rate this one and move on.
Sure. We can rate it out of 5 weed enhanced cupcakes, shall we say?
Why not? Jane eats more than 5 of those. So
I'll give it 2.5, Josh. I'll be generous and give it that extra half a cupcake for you. Yeah, you. Anna Faris is good. It's not too long. Some fun little supporting stuff. Overall, it just doesn't come together for me.
No, and that's fine. I am going to give it 4 cupcakes out of 5.
That's insane.
I think this movie is really good. and again, honestly, I was watching this and it's very short, as you pointed out. I was watching this and as I got to the end, I was like, I could start this over right now and enjoy it again. Not that I did that, which, you know, I didn't, but it's a kind of a comfort movie for me, really.
Josh, you're blowing my mind right now, man.
Dave, how would you rate this one?
I'm going 3.5 from me.
All right.
Cupcakes.
Yeah. Thank you, Dave.
What is going on this show today? Where am I? What Twilight Bizarro World awesome movie or episode am I in right now?
We'll come back in a moment and talk about the legacy of Smiley Face. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year in this episode of our special 10th retrospective season. We are back in 2007 talking about my pick, Smiley Face. And because this movie was, as we've said, really a giant failure upon its release, it didn't have a huge legacy, at least initially on its own. I do think that it's become more appreciated as part of the sort of stoner canon alongside a lot of the movies that we have been mentioning, and in a general critical sense. But Jason, you're right that compared to something like Super Troopers that built that following, it's not on that level. It's definitely a level below that.
That's right, Josh. It's a level below that, at least.
And Gregg Araki has had kind of a weird career is subsequent to this film. As we said, this was his follow-up to Mysterious Skin, which was hugely acclaimed and was kind of a breakout for him beyond the world of indie films. Lots of award nominations, also a big breakout for Joseph Gordon-Levitt. And then he follows it up with this movie that could not be more different. And since then, he's not been that prolific as a filmmaker. He returned to kind of his outrageous roots with a movie called Kaboom, which I have not seen, and also returned to the more serious, prestige-y mode of Mysterious Skin with White Bird in a Blizzard with Shailene Woodley from 2014, which is not great. And that's actually,
people don't really like that one.
Yeah, it was a movie that seemed like that was what was the real follow-up, to Mysterious Skin, with another serious story based on a novel about, trauma and abuse. And it didn't really hit. And that was the last movie he made 8 years ago. He created a Starz TV series called Now Apocalypse, which was also more similar to his early work that got canceled after a single season. And I reviewed that and watched maybe 4 or 5 episodes or something and was not a fan of that. And nobody really watched that. And he's been working in TV, doing, directing on some TV shows just for hire. So it seems like in a way he's primed for a comeback, especially as those early films, the new queer cinema stuff, I feel like just keeps growing in reputation. For him to return maybe to something like that, people would be open to it.
I think so. It's also interesting if you read about his personal life because of the backlash against him because he identified as gay. And then he was partners with Kathleen Robertson, the actress, for so many years. And there was like a backlash from the gay community against him. And he said basically like, yeah, I guess I don't identify as anything at this point, but can we just let the dude do whatever he wants, and as long as he's doing it consensually without hurting anyone, and not worry about it. So,
right. No, totally. And I think maybe that's another thing where that idea of being, fluid and not labeling and following your personal feelings or whatever is a lot more accepted now than maybe it was at the time when he was seen as this, like, one of the few like major filmmakers who was out and, vocal about it. And that was seen almost like, I guess, as a betrayal by some people.
And it's funny if you look at these supporting players, right? At the time, probably the most famous were Danny Masterson and Adam Brody. And now, it's gone completely the other way. John Cho, Danny Trejo, Jane Lynch, John Krasinski, all very famous at this point. Adam Brody, we know Dave loves The Kid Detective and is working. Danny Masterson, not so much.
Yeah, let's not talk about Danny Masterson. But John Krasinski was on The Office at this time, so he was, getting there. And John Cho too. This was after the first Harold and Kumar movie. It was in between the first two. So both of them kind of building towards where they are now, not nearly at that level. And of course, Krasinski now as a director and like an action star, which is, it's still weird to me that John Krasinski became an action star. And John Cho, as a big star, Cowboy Bebop and all that stuff. So we should also shout out our fellow Las Vegan Carrot Top for his quick 2-second cameo. Yeah.
Well, Josh, as you know, I'm a big Cobra Kai fan. So the William Zabka thing, which was probably like a throwaway back then, is nice. And Jane Lynch has 5 Emmys. Did you know that?
Are they all for Glee?
I don't know. I mean, could some be for maybe for Party Down or Hollywood Game Night as a host or something like that?
Yeah, so I don't know if Party Down got any Emmy attention. Unfortunately, it should have. But yeah, it's possible she got a hosting thing for that game show or something. But she deserves Emmys. Although you were saying that like everything should be a showcase for Jane Lynch. And I think Jane Lynch is great. But Glee proved that everything should not be a showcase for Jane Lynch because they, when her character was a breakout, they just gave her more and more ridiculous over the top stuff to do. And it completely fell flat.
Well, okay. So, I didn't mean she should be the star on screen of everything, but I do think like if you give her like I still love Role Models. Everything she did in that movie is hilarious. And in Party Down, that's the biggest difference, right? Between the 2 seasons is we lose Jane Lynch from season 1 to season 2. No offense, Megan Mullally, but you're not Jane Lynch, So Josh, Anna Faris, what do you think she does from here? Because Mom was successful. She's a very successful voice actor. Probably the days of her starring leading lady stuff, probably not in the cards in Hollywood anymore. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. She's had a weird career where, like you said, at this time, it seemed like she was going to be this big comedy star. And another movie that she did soon after this called The House Bunny, which I think she's funny in.
She's great in that. Yeah.
Yeah. But then it just didn't kind of get to that next level. And like you said, she did Mom, the sitcom, which she was on for like 7 seasons or something. And I'm sure she got a lot of money and that was a very successful show. But she ended that, like she left before the show ended. And I think her character had gotten kind of increasingly marginalized. And it seemed like she was not particularly happy with being on that show toward the end. And when the show itself ended and had a big finale, like a season or 2 later, she didn't even return. So it seemed like there was kind of a not great ending to her time on that show. And from here, I don't know. I mean, I could see her starring in like maybe a, cable or streaming comedy that allows her to have more range than a network 3-camera sitcom, although there was a lot of dramatic stuff in Mom. But I don't think she's ever going to be that big star that she looked like she could have been.
We mentioned Jane Lynch as the host of Hollywood Game Night. I think Anna Faris would be a great game show host.
Yeah, she absolutely could be. And I think she has some like lifestyle brand stuff that she does, as so many actors do these days. And, I'm sure she's doing fine. Again, especially if nothing else, all the residuals from Mom are going to, set her where she can just do whatever she wants for the rest of her career.
Chris Pratt divorce money. Ooh.
Possibly that as well.
What about this weekend? We've got the big Scream requel out in theaters. We could get a Scary Movie requel to capitalize on that.
Yeah, that's possible. To be fair, I have not seen any of the Scary Movie movies. Although, Dave, that seems like your kind of thing.
The first one is straight up great. I will stand up for it all the way. But the others,
can I tell you guys a hilarious story about Scary Movie that is only like sideways adjacent to this episode? Really not at all, right?
Sure.
But yeah, the first one is very funny, and there's a scene in it where Anna Faris she's riding a dude, I forget who it is, and he climaxes in such a way that it's like a geyser, right? Like, and she gets shot off into the ceiling, right? And a friend of mine who saw it, who was a virgin in his 20s, saw it with his mom. And while they watched it, his mom looked over to him and said, "That's going to be you one day."
Oh, jeez. Oh man, I hope that guy wasn't like traumatized and eventually, was able to have a healthy sex life.
I hope so too. I mean, and I'm not knocking him for being a virgin in his 20s, but it must be not fun to have your mom be like, "That's going to be you when you finally fuck," So.
Yeah, that's not a thing to say to your kid. Definitely not.
Yeah, it probably doesn't help. So
no. Well, that's a great note there to end on. Unless, do you want to say anything else about the legacy of this film, Jason?
I do think that this genre is definitely a fun genre that deserves more stuff coming out in it, especially now. We want all the comedies we can get. And I think we named some great ones, Josh.
Yeah. And I don't know if this is true or not, but I feel like with marijuana becoming more, legalized and accepted generally, that maybe that will allow for more of these comedies to be made and reach mainstream audiences.
Josh, do you think it's weird that Dylan Haggerty, the writer, didn't go on to anything else? I mean, there were enough good reviews here, right? And he was working with a prestigious filmmaker.
Right. And I don't know the story behind it. That is one thing that we didn't mention there. I mean, his credits on IMDb post 2007 are almost entirely non-existent. Looked like he was a writer on Adventure Time, the animated series. He's got a couple episode credits for that. And randomly was a producer on the Luc Besson movie, Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. I don't know how that happened. So, I mean, those credits are so unrelated that there's got to be some sort of, behind the scenes story. And, Jason, as you know, it's possible in Hollywood as a screenwriter to be working and have no credits. It's possible that he's written and even sold multiple scripts since 2007 that just were never made. And I don't know.
He's no Julie Haggerty.
No relation there. Spelled differently also, but Julie Haggerty, very funny. So we'll leave it there. That is Smiley Face, and that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. Follow us on social media.
I'm Jason Harris Comedy or Jay Harris Comedy on all the socials. My website, goforjason.com, was flushed down the toilet like government weed was in this movie. We're at awesomemovieyear.com and Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram. Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter.
I am at joshbellhateseverything.com, where you can read from some number of years ago my pick for this movie as my number one first time watch of previous years, from whenever it was that I first saw it. Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook and at Signal Bleed on Twitter, and listen to our producer David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us on social media at Piecing Pod, and check out our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where I'm really, really curious as to whether we've got some fans of this movie.
I'm sure there's at least one.
And also in that group, I'd love to know what movies they would want us to have covered from these years that we haven't in this retrospective.
Yes. Yeah. We like your feedback. Or what's your favorite stoner movie?
Yeah.
Give us all the feedback.
So much feedback.
What are we talking about in our next episode, Jason?
Josh, did you know that Awesome Movie Year is a podcast about movies?
I had heard that.
So we're going to talk about a movie that loves movies. It's our foreign film pick. It's from 1989. It's the Italian film that won the Oscar for Best Foreign Feature of 1990, if I'm not mistaken. It's called Cinema Paradiso.
So tune in next time for Jason's awesome Italian accent.
Cinema Paradiso.
Thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.